Mike McNeil is the CEO and co founder of Fleet Device Management, an open source platform that helps organizations securely manage and monitor devices with transparency and control. With that, Mike, we're thrilled to have you at the live event today, and I am very much looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you. Glad to be here, Michael. So, Fleet is a company I started, 6 years ago now, with a guy named Zach Wasserman and a guy named Sid Brandy from GitLab. And we saw a really complicated world of device management software. Back in, at that time it was 2020, the tech was already almost 20 years old. Like Jamf was created in 2002. Workspace ONE, which is a popular, or especially when it was AirWatch, kind of a cross-platform device management tool for Windows and Mac. That was 2003. At the time, it was the biggest Series A investment ever. Which is kind of crazy if you look back. And then 7 years later, Microsoft Intune came out, which is a mostly Microsoft focused, but multi-platform solution for managing devices. And if you're in that world, like Sid was in around 2020, where you got a company that's about to go public, of course, where you already have maybe thousands of computers, maybe you have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of computers and smartphones. It's you don't have a ton of great options, and a lot of times people end up with more than one tool. And also, there's really important data on these computers. Like people are typing their passwords, they're typing important confidential customer information, and all kinds of PII. And you want to understand where that data is going. And Sid, at the time, being an open source guy and having founded GitLab, right? He was like, man, this should really be open source. So when we started the company, we really set out to kind of achieve that. Like, how can we build a world where the devices that are running are being monitored by open source software? And it kind of nifty because then employees can understand, hey, this is exactly what's running on my device. Which if you've ever had maybe an engineer running a Linux computer that doesn't want their device to be managed, you can probably understand where I'm coming from. So that was where we started. Kind of since then, I think I'll just back up a slide so you can see since where we're at today. Fleet has grown to manage 2 million devices in 90 countries. And the reason for that is kind of multi, there's more than one reason, but the strongest reason is that it's really hard to go in and deal with what's changed in the meantime with tech that was built kind of over here on the west side of this timeline. And these vendors have evolved. They're smart people, great people who worked on these products and continue to work on these products. But it's hard, right, with kind of the competing incentives for there to really be a single open solution that can work across every device. Like these tools were really built to teach people how to manage devices. Like in 2002, really people didn't know what the heck to do with Macs, let alone what was about to come next, which is the wave of smartphones. Meanwhile, like by the time we got to 2020, COVID hits, remote work is blowing up, and everybody's having to figure out how to manage remote laptops. And that's about when Fleet was born. So kind of from day one, we set out to say, how can we solve this problem with kind of the modern era and the benefit of hindsight about everything that's changed over the past 20 years. But one of the things that's changed even now, like in the last year or so, has been AI, and really AI picking up in a way that not only can help engineers like write code faster, but can also help like bots and attackers be able to exploit vulnerabilities a lot faster. So meanwhile, the world is still patching, updating computers in a matter of months. But these new vulnerability bots are getting exploited in hours. So in Fleet, one of the things that ended up being really fortunate about this trend, I guess, that's emerged in the last year is because Fleet was built in a modern kind of time frame, there's a lot of decisions that were made in the product that made it really, really easy to take advantage of AI as someone that manages devices too. So not just a bot, not just an attacker, but the person on the other end. So there's this thing called infrastructure as code where you can take basically a GitHub repo or a GitLab repo, and you have a few files in there, just some simple YAML files that say things like setup experience, true, or install these apps of the first time someone boots up their laptop. Or we're going to have a zero touch experience where we send laptops to the person's door, they open it up, they go through a simple flow that we've kind of carefully controlled. We put our logo in there. We've made that experience really, really nice, and we've eliminated a lot of the friction that can happen in onboarding. Instead of doing all of that in the user interface, which you still can in Fleet, you can also check that in to that repo. Same thing for compliance monitoring, compliance rules, profiles on the computer that are basically presets that lock down certain settings. And you can do all of that again in the UI where you click around, or since you already know what you're doing, and again, most of the folks in that have hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of devices, they've done this before, right? So what that means is if there's a way to go faster, right, and a way to be more precise and reduce some of that operational risk, where somebody breaks your Citrix environment during Thanksgiving, right, and you're having to come back into the office, that's pretty cool. And so a lot of teams were already doing this. You'll hear it called GitOps, configuration as code, infrastructure as code. And on servers, people have been doing this for a really long time, right? But the cool thing about this, beyond just the big piece, which is you make a pull request, you can see all the history, right? Someone else approves that pull request. You can undo, you can roll back that pull request if that change was the culprit and broke something. And that whole history is very, very clear. All that's great, but that can sound like a lot of learning that you have to do, right? Like if you've got people that a lot of people in the device management community really taught themselves. Maybe they were Best Buy Geek Squad people, or they were Apple geniuses, or they went and got their TIAA certification, and now maybe 3, 4, 5 years later, they're in an organization and they're controlling all the laptops, right? They're like making everything run. They're maintaining Mark Zuckerberg's laptop, right? They've got a lot to do and they need to do it pretty fast. Who has time to do this extra layer of approvals, right? Especially since Git can be kind of scary. Well, one of the things that we set out to do, because just me personally in a past life, I taught a few, I think about 12 different people to kind of code from scratch, like working in fast food, working in delivery. And what I learned is that it's actually one of the hardest parts for people is really getting over that hurdle of like contributing from the beginning. Now, you don't need to write code really to do any of these things we've been talking about in device management. You will have to do some scripting from time to time. But when it comes to the actual contributions and being able to see like, okay, like Lena just made a pull request. Let me just go check that real quick. Let me approve it. Okay. All that's fine. You can just click around and do it. But just that word "get" scared a lot of people. So what we found is that if you get into a workshop, and we've done about 50 of these now around the world, and you sit people down and you sort of walk them through, here's how you do this, not with a terminal, not with a fancy code editor. You can do all those things if you want. Just with the mouse and clicking the pencil button and changing these little keys and then seeing if it works. And what we've seen is that people with zero Git experience can become proficient in less than 4 hours and are able to kind of take that and run with it. And today, about 50% of Fleet's customers use this approach, infrastructure as code. Now, something that happened just in the last couple of months is, I don't know if you followed kind of the AI news, when Opus 4.6 came out from Anthropic, there was a big change in terms of the capability for generating code with AI. So one of the cool things about infrastructure as code is that it also means you can use all of those AI coding tools which already exist. And really, if you want to use those AI coding tools, The only way to really do that safely is if you can review what they've created first. So another thing you can do is kind of skip having to write these configs, having to write these scripts altogether. And you can also just say, talk to a Slack bot or go into Claude and say, hey, I need all of my endpoints to be ISO 27001 compliant, which is a big ask, by the way. So that one takes a while to run if you do that. You could say, patch this CVE 2026, so on and so forth. You could also say, like, make sure that all of our browsers are up to date automatically. Make sure that our OS stays up to date in a reasonable time frame. And that's kind of the level of abstraction you can get to, and it does a pretty decent job as long as you review it. So that's probably one of the most exciting things about Fleet. The thing I'll point out that is more like an everyday victory that we hear from a lot of folks is you can actually go to any device, check the live data, the live state of that device, and instead of waiting like 4 hours, 6 hours, or even an hour, you're able to get that information right away. And of course, if the device is off or it's dead and it's not going to be, there's no battery, it's never coming back for months, you're still going to have access to the state from before. So that's a pretty different model. And the effect of this is that, going back to where we were on this timeline, there's a lot of pressure, not just from this patching need that's emerging, right? From vulnerability exploitation that's happening so fast, but just from new compliance rules. Like, you have multiple countries often where you have people with computers. You may have to deal with labor boards in some cases, Germany, Austria, et cetera. And there's a lot of reporting you got to do, and there's a lot of automation that you can do to do it more efficiently. I think, as a lot of people know, there's not a ton of money to add headcount right now to get around these things. So it's like, how can we automate faster? So if you're not going to 2 different systems, that helps. If you're not waiting 4 hours to see whether the script you wrote works, that helps. Another thing that is a pretty big focus for Fleet, and it's been important to us from the beginning, just kind of coming from more of like an engineering background, is man, it's so annoying when you have to deal with thousands of computers. Some of them are going to be offline, right? And there's going to be weird things people have done to put their computer or even their phone in a weird state. Even servers, actually. Fleet can also work on servers. But one of the biggest problems in device management is you don't always get a really good look about exactly what's happening under the hood. It's kind of a black box. And Fleet, of course, is open source, but that's not going to help you see what error happened on one of your thousands of devices. What helps you there is we kind of took that principle of open source and basically squeezed that into every aspect of the product. So when you're going in and you're seeing, hey, I had to send a lock to that device because we offboarded that person, they're going to mail their laptop back. Here's the shipping label. That lock command sends an MDM command, which is a piece of XML. Basically, it sends it over the Apple push notification service for Apple devices. There's a different way to do it for Microsoft. There's actually no way to do it for Linux, which is growing. It's up to about 5% of uh, market share at this point for desktop Linux. And so we built one. So we built remote lock for Linux. We built our own remote wipe for Linux. But behind the scenes, like, what's happening, right? And in traditional device management tools, you don't have that visibility, uh, which is annoying, especially when you're trying to figure out why something didn't work. So in Fleet, you have that for every script you run, every MDM command you run, uh, every app you install, every app that auto patches. You have the full activity feed. You have exactly the output from your scripts. You have exactly the error that failed. And it's a lot more like working in a DevOps kind of a world where you have, even if you're not using infrastructure as code, you have kind of that CI/CD experience where you can see exactly what went wrong and when it started working again. Um, So yeah, like if you can imagine kind of where you're at today and whether these things would be possible, there's always a way to get there. And I encourage you to take a look at the tools you have at your disposal right now and sort of say, like, how can we take advantage of some of this stuff? I think there's a lot of evidence that shows that Fleet is a really, really efficient way to get to these outcomes. But the important thing is that we get to these outcomes, right? Like, there's gonna be auto update. It's gonna have to exist. We're gonna have to deal with all of the considerations about patching and not kicking the CEO out of a board meeting, right, to do an OS update. We don't want to kick traders moving trillions of dollars off of a Bloomberg terminal. All that stuff is still problems we have to solve. But meanwhile, we got to patch faster. So one way or the other, you got to get there. Fleet makes it really easy to do. Uh, if we're going to use AI to move faster, we've got to have a human sign off on it. So whether you're using infrastructure as code or some other way, I haven't seen another way that really does it efficiently yet, but I'm sure a lot of different ideas will come out in the next few years. But if you're using AI now, or if you want to use AI anytime in the next, year or 2 years, infrastructure as code is the ticket. And then the other thing is, how do we make sure we don't break every computer or cause problems? And being able to review each other's changes really reduces operational risk. So, however you get there, I think that's the path. Got a little formatting issue here, but as you can see, moving MDMs has gotten a lot easier as well. So if you whether you're moving to Fleet or moving to something else, more than ever this year and about a little bit of last year, Apple's made it much easier to get Apple devices and move them between solutions. So if that was blocking you before, I'd also encourage you to take a fresh look. Thanks for listening.
Mike, fantastic. And I know we have quite a few individual organizations in the audience that are wondering how all of this impacts their organization. And I am sure that we'll have quite a few questions coming in for you. So for everybody that's listening, in front of you, you have a Q&A box. Type your questions into that Q&A box. Mike will be joining us on this very next Q&A panel coming up live in just a few minutes.